everybody, today we're going to do a science experiment on density. For this fun density experiment, you will need maple syrup, milk, water, dish detergent, cooking oil, and rubbing alcohol. You will also need a turkey baster, measuring spoons, I use tablespoons, and 3 household objects that vary in density and mass if you want to test out the density. Now, if this project goes well, then you should see these layers in yours. Here I have several measuring spoons laid out. As you can see in tiny words written underneath whatever measurement it is, whether it's a teaspoon, tablespoon, a half, a third, whichever, it says how many milliliters that equals. And that's important when we're doing conversions, which we'll do later, to kind of work in some fractions. Now, you don't have to do this with your kids, but this is something that's really good for the older children to work in to connect to that math that they might be learning. Now, for this experiment, it is especially important that you make sure to put the same amount of each material in. Here I've got 1 tablespoon or 15 milliliters that I'm going to use to measure out maple syrup. Now, this might be a good point to pause and ask your students what other measuring spoons or whatever they can use and how much of each they can use to measure out 15 milliliters. But you don't have to do that, of course, it's just an option. So here I go, and I'm going to make sure to put 45 milliliters of each substance in the cup. So we're going to start out with this maple syrup because maple syrup is the most dense of the liquids that we're putting in here. Now, density is actually referring to the mass of an object, which is how much matter it has, divided by the volume. So the volume is the same no matter what for each of these 45 milliliters. And the mass is going to differ depending on how heavy the material is. Also, to achieve the results that we're wanting, you want to make sure that none of the liquid touches the side of the container as you're pouring it in, so it doesn't mix with the other stuff we're mixing. Here you can see the maple syrup in the glass. Next, we're going to measure out milk. Make sure, if you use the same measuring spoon, that you wash it out very well, as I did, using a tablespoon yet again, or 15 milliliters, which I will dump in 3 times to equal the 45 that I'm making sure to get of each material. Now, as you can see here, I accidentally got some of the milk on the side of the container. I made sure to go ahead and wipe it out so that way it didn't mix with the next materials that I was putting in. So if you do that, that's perfectly okay. Just make sure to wipe it out like I did. Now, when adding the dish soap, it gets a little tricky because the density is so weird with the dish soap. You want to use a turkey baster or some kind of dropper to slowly drop this material in. You're still dropping the same amount. Make sure that you're measuring out the same 45 milliliters. I'll show you. I did that here, measuring 15 milliliters 3 times with this dish soap. to use the turkey baster again for the water after washing it out really good, so there's no more dish soap left. And I'm going to measure out the same 50 milliliters 3 times. And for the rest of the materials after the dish soap, you actually want to touch the side of the glass right above the dish soap and slowly sprinkle it in, and you'll see me demonstrate that. But that's just because the densities of these, I think, are so close that it's easy for them to mix if you drop it in too hard. So it's very important to take it slow if you want to see the layers that you should see after this experiment is done. Now we'll adjust the camera, and you should be able to see, in yours as well as mine, the 4 layers that we have currently. Now we're going to measure out the vegetable oil. Now I'm still going to use the turkey baster, as should you, with all the materials from now on. But I think it's important, if you're going to use this, to talk to your kids about converting things and fractions and stuff like that you will want to use the measuring spoons just kind of to practice those skills. So for instance, if you're using half a tablespoon, which should be right around 7.5 milliliters, you should then use how many of these to equal 3 of the regular tablespoons, or 45 milliliters. Yes, 6, and that's what I'm measuring out here, but just a splash extra of vegetable oil, so that way there's plenty to go in the dropper. Now you should have 5 visible layers, as seen. Now we're ready to add our final layer. Here I have a half tablespoon, which, as we know, will equal 6 of these to get to the 3 tablespoons. Now, a lot of places recommend that you continue to use the turkey baster. I took a chance here that you might not want to take with your kids, especially if it might ruin this experiment. But I took the chance of using a measuring spoon to pour on the sides for this one. So, and luckily that worked out for me, but it might not work out for everybody. So just, if you feel more comfortable with the turkey baster, please, by all means, go right ahead and use it. And here we have our 6 layers. Now, to test density even further, you're going to choose 3 household objects that are going to fit in the cup to kind of see where it measures on the density level. So here I've got a blueberry, which is about as dense as this unit of water. Then I have the screw, which I'm going to put on a different side of the cup so that way it doesn't disturb too much of the glass. And it's sunk all the way down to the maple syrup, so it is as dense or denser than the maple syrup. And finally, I have a paper clip, which surprisingly to me was just as dense as the maple syrup, or more so. Now, this ping pong ball is really interesting because you would think, due to its size, that it would be more dense, but size and density don't always go along, such as a wooden log that can be floating in a pond of water. Meanwhile, a rock of even less size won't.